What's going on, duelists? It's your boy Nick, bringing you today on the channel an update to one of my most favorite decks of all time, FA. For those of you new to the channel, welcome. My name is Nick. We do Yu-Gi-Oh content mainly focused around rogue and casual decks alike. If that's the kind of Yu-Gi-Oh that you're interested in, then I highly encourage you to subscribe to the channel. We are working our way to 2,000 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. So with the intro out of the way, FA, which is an abbreviation of Formula Athlete, is an archetype in this game based around mostly wind machine monsters, and it's a synchro-based deck based around racing. And as ironic as that is, you wouldn't believe how incredibly slow the deck actually winds up being. And as a result, FA is one of those decks that is extremely casual, and by no means am I saying that this deck is going to be meta relevant, or even if you go to locals, you might also struggle even in a local setting potentially, just because of all the issues this deck struggles with. However, despite all of that, that's not going to stop me making content based on my favorite deck. Even though it is my favorite, I'm still able to willingly accept the fact that the deck isn't where I would like it to be. Hopefully FA gets new support in the future, but it is a deck that I hold near and dear to my heart. One of the first profiles that I launched this channel with, and also my first deck that I topped locals with way back during toss format. And it just holds a special place in my heart. Obviously, it's barely a shell of its former self. We lost cards like Halka Fibrax, we lost cards like Auroradon, and even more recently, we lost cards like Baron and Savage. Cards that really helped a deck like this be able to compete on a more relevant level. So it was difficult to make an update to this strategy, but it's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And with that being said, we're going to dive into this profile. It is a 60 card deck list, so bear with me on that. It's a little bit larger, but I'll explain why I chose to run a 60 variant as we get further into the profile. So we're going to start things off with a playset of FA Auto Navigator, who is basically this deck's main starter. It's a level 1 wind machine tuner, and basically when it's normal or special summoned, it allows you to add an FA field spell from the deck to your hand, effectively functioning as a terraforming in archetype, which is really cool. Spoiler alert, FAs have several different field spells, all of which grant them different effects, and the big thing about this deck is that the FA monsters, they modulate their levels. They're a synchro deck that is able to almost make any synchro they want, because they can increase and decrease their levels on the fly for the most part. Generally when you're activating FA spell and trap cards or FA spell trap effects, the FA monsters will increase their level by 1, which is not once per turn. Auto Navigator, allowing you to search for field spells, is really huge. In addition to that, if she's in the hand or graveyard and you control an FA monster whose level is higher than its original, she can target that monster, special summon herself from the hand or grave, and then she reduces that monster's level back to its original, and her level becomes the amount reduced. She doesn't gain the levels, her level becomes what was taken away. So very interesting tuner extender of sorts, and like I said, a terraforming on legs. Very important card to the strategy, of which you always want to max out on. So really great card there. Up next, we have a playset of FA Hang-On Mock, arguably their second best card in the theme. Now, unfortunately, this card isn't that incredible just because of the fact that it's simply not a starter nor an extender. It's a monster that all it does is it gains 300 attack times its level, which, on a base normal summon, that puts it at 1200, given that it is level 4. And then every time an FA spell or trap or spell trap effect is activated, he gains a level, and that is not once per turn, which obviously increases his attack by default. Then, if he is level 7 or higher, he gains an additional benefit where any card sent to the opponent's graveyard is banished instead. So he basically turns into like a Masked Hero Dark Law, for this archetype, which is obviously really cool. Just having a one-sided macrocosmos is detrimental to most decks, and that's part of the reason why I think FA even has a glimmer of hope as far as like being able to compete to some extent, because there's a lot of decks that will simply lose to this card by itself. And if that wasn't crazy enough, he's also unaffected by the activated effects of monsters whose level or rank are lower than his. So as he continues to gain levels, not only does he get stronger in terms of stats, but he also becomes immune to monsters whose levels or ranks are less than his, which is really insane when you think about it. So really cool card. Like I said, you definitely max out on it, but it is not a starter or an extender by any stretch of the imagination. He does unfortunately need other cards to alongside with him to be able to take on his full benefit. Then up next we have one copy of FA Whipcrosser, the other main deck FA monster. Gains attack equal to its level times 300, and your opponent must pay 300 life points to activate the effect of a monster whose level or rank is lower than his. That's not that relevant. You know, you get a couple, 300 burn damage here and there. This isn't a burn deck, so, I'm not really sure why this card has that effect on it, but, I mean, whatever. I'm not complaining. And just like Hang on Mock, each time an FA spell trap or spell trap effect is activated, he gains a level. And then if he's level 7 or higher, just like Hang on Mock, he does have an additional effect where the opponent cannot discard or send cards from their hand to grave to activate a card or effect, which basically means they can't hand trap you. They can't ash you, they can't Veiler you. Any card that would require a discard as cost to activate or to send a card from hand as cost to activate simply can't be used. So pretty cool effect, however, not as relevant as Hang on Mock. I would rather have the one-sided macro than having an effect that simply, doesn't let my opponent, ash me. For as cool as that sounds, in practice, it's really not all it's cracked up to be. So we just run Whipcrosser as a one-of, just to have an additional name in the deck. Then to round out the last FA monster we main deck is actually FA Dark Dragster. This is a really cool extender for the deck. However, it's not the perfect extender. It is still situational at times, simply because he can only special himself from the hand if we control an FA who's level 7 or higher, which again, sometimes requires additional cards to facilitate. So we just play this as a one-of. It is searchable, and while he's on the field, he can target any card in the field, reduce his level by 3, and destroy that card. So he's like removal for the deck, which is searchable. We just run him as a one-of. Overall, a decent extender, but not the greatest extender, simply because sometimes you can draw this early, and he's not live yet because you don't have an FA on field who's level 7 or better. So it can conflict at times, but as a one-of, it's been fine. Now, let's dive into the FA field spells, of which we play 3 copies of UA Hyper Stadium. This card is always treated as an FA card, which is why it's, we can search it and whatnot. But when this card's activated, we get to add an FA monster from the deck to our hand. And then, as an additional effect, we can reveal a field spell in our hand, pay 1,000 life points, and we get an additional normal summon of an FA in addition to our normal summon set this turn, which is pretty cool. So it's a Rhoda, archetypal field spell Rhoda, very good. The only drawback that I feel this card really has is that it doesn't have an effect when it's destroyed by a card effect like all the other FA field spells do. So in that regard, it's a bit lackluster, and it is also a hard once per turn on activation, whereas the other field spells are not. But overall, you max out on this just because it's effectively your 3rd, 4th, and 5th copies, or 4th, 5th, and 6th copies, of cards like Hang on Mock or Auto Navigator and whatnot. So pretty cool card there, and the double summon does come up, and it is pretty nice. Then we do have 3 copies of FA City Grand Prix, their best field spell in my opinion, followed up by 2 copies of Off-Road Grand Prix and 2 copies of Circuit Grand Prix. Now, all of these cards do different things, so we'll start from left to right. City Grand Prix increases the levels of all FA monsters during the main and the battle phase by 2, which is pretty cool. Keep in mind that when you activate the spell, you're activating an FA spell, so your FA monsters will activate to gain a level, and then once this card resolves and it's on the field, they will gain 2 levels additionally in the main and battle phase, effectively turning your Hang on Mock to level 7 off of a single card activation, which is cool. In addition to that, City Grand Prix states that while it's on the field, your opponent cannot target your FA monsters with card effects, and then if this card is destroyed, you can add an FA card from deck to hand, except a copy of itself. Now, all of the FA field spells here before you have that same graveyard effect, which I think is really cool. The problem is that, in my honest opinion, the deck doesn't have very many good ways to destroy their own field spells, outside of like Dark Dragster, which again is situational, and another card we'll talk about shortly called FA Test Run. That was my biggest issue with this archetype, was that, for an archetype that has literally 4 different field spells within their theme, they don't have a great way to cycle through them all. And that's a little bit to their detriment and why I feel like the deck is so slow. But we're getting a little off subject here. Up next, we're playing 2 copies of Off-Road Grand Prix, and it increases the levels of all FA monsters on the field by 2 during the main phase only. Then, if an FA monster you control is destroyed by battle, you can discard a random card from the opponent's hand, and then just like City Grand Prix, if it's destroyed, you get to search for an FA card, except a copy of itself. And then Circuit Grand Prix, which in my opinion is the worst one, and that's because it only grants your FA monsters 2 additional levels during the battle phase only, and it doesn't turn on their, level 7 or higher effects during the main phase, which is the issue that I have with it. And usually during the main phase is when you're going to want to be comboing off and synchro climbing. So this is the most lackluster of the bunch, but the reason why we still play 2 of it is because we are playing a Metalfoes package in this deck, and we use the Metalfoes as ways to pop these cards to generate us free advantage. Because again, just like Off-Road and City, Circuit Grand Prix when destroyed has the same graveyard effect to search for an FA card except itself. And then, like I said, during the battle phase only, it grants FAs 2 additional levels. And then if your FA monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you get to draw a card, but again, that's pretty negligible. Overall, you really want to be seeing City and Off-Road mostly in the hand. If you see Circuit, you just want to destroy it with any one of your other cards to initiate the search and help you get into better cards. So that is our ratio of the field spells that we play for this deck. Like I mentioned before, it is a 60 card variant. So moving on, we do play 3 copies of FA Test Run. Very strong quick play spell. It targets an FA monster you control, you change its battle position, and then you destroy a card on the field non-target. That is a really good effect, and this is a way that you can use to destroy your own field spells. However, it's extremely slow, as the card is a hard once per turn, and generally you'd rather use this as disruption for your opponent rather than using it to pop your own field spells. That's just my own honest opinion. And it has a really awesome graveyard effect, but unfortunately, Konami being Konami, they put this restriction on this card where you can't activate the grave effect during the turn it was sent there, and it really kicks the legs out from under this, in my honest opinion. It just makes the card extremely slow, because the grave effect is amazing. Basically, you can banish this from grave, target a face-up card you control, destroy it, and if you do, you can special summon an FA monster from your deck. So not only is it like an archetypal E-Telly from the graveyard, but it also destroys one of your field spells, which would trigger that field spell's effect to search as well. That is really cool value, but for whatever reason, they felt that it would just be too good for the game, and you can't use that grave effect the same turn this card is sent there. So it just makes the deck feel very slow, especially since, despite it being a quick play spell, its graveyard effect is still spell speed 1, which means you can only use it during your main phase. So it's not even like, you can use this as a quick effect out of the graveyard, because that's not how the game mechanic works. If that was the case, it'd be a little bit better and more understandable why they put a clause like that on here, but as it stands right now, it just makes no sense for that clause to be on this card. FA really does need all the help they can get, and I mean, it's not like, you popping your own field spell and specialing in FA from deck is going to spawn some ridiculous combo. Like, this deck really does need the help, and it pains me every time I look at this card. As much as I like it, seeing that clause on there really just upsets me, but it is one of the only few ways they have to remove cards on field, so you do play it at 3, because it is searchable, but outside of that, the card could definitely be much better, in my honest opinion. Now that's going to round out the FA cards for this deck. Now I mentioned this is a 60 card deck, so you're probably wondering, what is the rest of this massive stack of cards here? Well, that is simply ways to make this deck much faster, because like I said earlier, it's very slow despite it being race car themed, and it's one of the biggest gripes I have with the deck, despite how much I love it. So I wanted to find ways that would speed the deck up. So newly off the recent FNL list, we have 3 copies of Speedroid Terratop. As long as you control no monsters, you can just special summon it from hand, and when it's normal or special summoned, it allows you to add a Speedroid monster from the deck to your hand, of which we play 2 copies of Takatomborg and 1 copy of the Fuki Modoshi Piper. Hopefully I haven't butchered that name. But this is my Speedroid engine that I'm playing in this deck. Very consistent, honestly. Whenever you open Terratop, it basically guarantees you any Link 2 machine, or just any Link 2 in general, because you can search Takatomborg, and then Takatomborg can special itself while you control a wind monster, which is nice. And then we play the 1 copy of Modoshi Piper in the hands where you simply don't have access to a normal summon. You can just search Modoshi Piper off Terratop, and then normal summon the Modoshi Piper. She is a tuner, and you also get to excavate a card, since you would control 1 wind monster, and then just add that excavated card to your hand. So you kind of go, you get a free draw 1 basically, and then that allows you to make any level 7 synchro of your choice, which is pretty cool. So this is our Speedroid package. Really great to see Terratop back at 3. Very amazing card in this deck list. Same thing with Takatomborg. So we decided to run the Speedroid package in this deck to help speed things along. But in addition to that, because also, you can't just rely on Speedroid Terratop alone, I felt the deck needed more push. So we are also playing a Super Heavy Samurai package in the form of 3 Super Heavy Samurai Motorbike, followed by 3 Super Heavy Samurai Prodigy Wakaushi, 1 Super Heavy Samurai Monk Big Benkei, and 1 copy of Super Heavy Samurai Soul Horns. This is the entire Super Heavy Samurai package I'm playing. Basically, Motorbike and Wakaushi are your starters, and then you guys should all know how this works. You know, Bike can pitch itself from hand to search Wakaushi. You scale the Wakaushi effect as long as you have no spells and traps engraved. Can then place Big Benkei in your other pendulum zone, and then Wakaushi specials itself. And then Big Benkei, while you control a Super Heavy Sam, can then search out the Soul Horns. You go Soul Horns equipped to Wakaushi, and then special summon Soul Horns, and that gives you access into a level 5 Synchro play, or again, any Link 2 of your choice, which is obviously really strong. And then Motorbike, being another machine tuner that can also target a monster you control and increase its level by 2. Really cool synergy there with FA, so I just felt that the Super Heavy Samurai package was a really good engine to play in this deck to definitely help speed it up. Also, having access to pen scales allows you to be able to pendulum summon your FA monsters, you know, kind of pulling this deck off of its normal summon reliance, which is one of its biggest choke points in my opinion, which I like. So we're playing that package, but again, both Speedroid and Super Heavy Samurai only do so much. So I felt that the deck still needed a way to capitalize on them being able to pop field spells and trigger pluses off of it. So enter in the Metalfoes package, of which I'm playing 3 copies of Bismugear, 3 copies of Metalfoes Volflame, followed by 3 copies of Metalfoes Melcaster, and then we also play the 1 Vanisher, which we'll talk about shortly. But this is my entire Metalfoes lineup. All of the Metalfoes monsters share the exact same pendulum effect, and that effect is once per turn, you can target one other face-up card you control, destroy it, and if you do, you can set a Metalfoes spell trap directly from your deck. So the Metalfoes monsters are effectively just ways to pop your field spells without letting it feel neg, because, you know, you could sub these cards for something like, you know, MST or Twin Twisters, for example, but you're strictly going neg on those plays. Whereas at least with Metalfoes, like, not only do you pop your field spell, but you also get a body, or not a body, but a card from deck, and then the field spell will trigger to search you another card, so you still go plus and maintain field presence and hand advantage as well, which I really like as opposed to any other engine that you try to run to blow up your field spells. They are, you know, fire psychic monsters, and Bismugear and Melcaster are effect monsters along with Vanisher, and Bismugear, when destroyed, she can, during the end phase, search a Metalfoes card or monster from deck to hand, which is obviously really strong. And then Melcaster, when destroyed, can take a Metalfoes monster that's face up in your extra deck and add it to your hand, which is really powerful. And then Vanisher is kind of the odd man out. You generally don't use Vanisher for the scale effect. What you're going to use it for is this monster effect. He can target up to 2 face-up cards you control, including a Metalfoes, destroy them both, and then special himself from the hand. And then when he's special summoned by the effect of a Metalfoes card, including his own effect, he can target a monster the opponent controls or has in their grave and banish it. So I felt like that was really good removal to have in this deck. And like I said, the Metalfoes are just a way to, they give you additional pen scales and just give you ways to blow up your field spells, so you can kind of help speed things along and help get this deck kind of on the right track, so to speak, no pun intended. But moving on, to further increase the deck's ceiling, we are also playing a small Magician Souls package, comprising of 2 Illusion of Chaos and 2 Souls. It pairs quite nicely with the Metalfoes cards, because one of the spell traps they can set is actually a very nice target to send for Souls effect to get a draw, which we'll talk about further. So you play 2 Illusion, 2 Souls. Also, Illusion's a nice way to shuffle back any bricks that you would open, like the Big Benkei, for example, which would completely turn off the Super Heavy Samurai combo. So you definitely don't want to have issues like that, so the Illusion of Chaos does help in those scenarios. Then for our non-engine slots, we simply play 3 Ash and 3 Ogre. This is kind of up to personal preference. You can kind of play whatever you feel like. Again, this deck is not meta. It is extremely casual, and I mainly built this list just to have fun. So I'm not expecting, you know, to go to locals and dominate. I just wanted to build one of my favorite archetypes and see kind of what I could do with it in, you know, 2024. So that rounds out the monsters. Now we're just going to finish out the rest of the main deck by going over the traps, of which you play 3 copies of Metalfoes Counter and 1 copy of Metalfoes Combination. Now you're probably wondering, wait, where are the Metalfoes fusion spells? Like, you're playing Metalfoes, why aren't you running the fusions? I tested this deck a lot, and I came to the realization that the Metalfoes fusions aren't actually that impactful, and they're pretty hard to make, especially if you're not playing a pure Metalfoes deck, because of their restrictive materials. The only, like, semi-generic one is Mithrilium. She just requires a Metalfoes plus a Pendulum. However, a lot of the time you'll find during testing and combos that In order for you to make Mithrilium, you needed to run Metalfoes Fusion, because that allowed you to use material from the extra deck, as opposed to Metalfoes Fusion, which only lets you use material from hand or grave. The problem is that Metalfoes can't recycle itself from graveyard in the way that Metalfoes Fusion can. So it became a bit clunky, and there were also times where when I would even make Mithrilium, her effect wasn't even live, because you also needed 2 Metalfoes cards engraved to shuffle back, so Mithrilium could achieve the bounce. And there were times when even when I'd go through all those hoops to get her on the board, her effect wasn't even live. In addition to that, you know, her effective float, while cool, was mainly used as a way to chain block Halka-Fibrax combos back in the day, but now that we don't have the Hulk, her effective float feels a lot less impactful now. So I opted to just cut the Metalfoes fusions completely, and we're really just using the Metalfoes pendulum scales as scales and ways to pop field spells. And the card that we're going to be setting is usually Counter, which just guarantees us an extra body on the next turn, because when a card or cards we control is destroyed by battle or card effect, we can special summon a Metalfoes from deck. And then Combination is simply here because we play the Magician's Souls package, and Combination's an amazing card to send with Souls, getting us a draw and a search effectively, which is really strong. So that kind of explains why we're not playing the Metalfoes fusions or their spells. And the last card to round out the 60 card deck list is 1 copy of Vanadium Reframing, pretty much an Omni Negate that is searchable through a card that we can make in our extra deck, which we'll talk about momentarily. So like I said, this rounds out the 60 card main deck of my FA build for the May 2024 format. Like I said, not competitive by any stretch of the imagination. It's really just a casual deck that I built just to have fun with, play against your friends, maybe take it to locals as long as that locals isn't, you know, super try hard. I don't expect this deck to really do much in the way of, like, you know, competitive success, at least not until they get some serious support, hopefully in the future. But with that being said, let's move on to the extra deck, of which we play 1 copy of FA Shining Star GT, their only archetypal Link monster. This card is kind of in a weird spot for me. As much as I like it, it's also a card that, like, didn't really help the archetypes, you know, solve its issues. Like most Link monsters, you know, that we'll get will completely fix the archetype's problems. This was not one of those cards, sadly. You know, FA is this deck that, like, wants to level modulate, but how do you put a level modulation effect on a card that doesn't have a level? Well, Konami's solution to that was have it build counters upon itself each time an FA spell or trap or spell trap effect is activated, which is fine. However, those counters don't do anything other than negate an opponent's activated monster effect, which again is cool. I'm not complaining. It is a monster negate. The caveat to this, though, is that this card does require a lot of setup, and FA in its pure form struggles to even get this card on field while also still maintaining additional FA bodies afterwards so that it can point to those cards and gain the attack. Because as it stands right now, it is a 0 attack Link monster unless it points to an FA monster in which it gains 300 attack times that monster's level. But if it's not pointing to anything, it's literally the worst Appaloosa you've ever seen. Because anybody could just summon a monster, run this over by battle, and now the negates don't even matter. So it's an okay card, but really not what FA needed in the grand scheme. And this is, like I said, solidifies my point in what I was saying about this deck definitely needs support. So we just play this as a 1-of in the deck. And then up next is pretty much the synchro lineup of your dreams, because FA can basically make any synchro they want, given that they have so much ability and freedom to change their levels. So we're pretty much playing 1 copy of Formula Synchron, 1 Garden Rose Flora, who's basically an honorary FA at this point, given that she can pop field spells and produce a token, and she's a synchro tuner. We play the 1 archetypal FA Dawn Dragster, which in my opinion is their best extra deck card. Spell Trap Negate, does piercing damage, gains a level each time an FA spell trap is used. Powerhouse of a card, in my honest opinion. We play the 1 Ancient Fairy Dragon, which is back. Love the fact that we're able to play this card in this deck now. Unfortunately, it is errated, so it's not as good as it was previously, but definitely still an amazing powerhouse of a card. And despite how many things we lost, you know, like Hulk, Baron, and whatnot, at least we get something back. So, you know, thank you, Konami, for throwing us somewhat of a bone. Then we also play 1 copy of Clearwing Fast Dragon and 1 copy of Speedroid Kite Drake. We also play 1 Visas Amritara, which is how we're able to search for the Vanadium Reframing counter trap. We also play the 1 Axel Synchro Stardust Dragon in this deck, followed by the other archetypal FA Synchro, which is Motorhome Transport. Really cool card in my opinion. If it's level 11 or higher, it can't be destroyed by battle or card effects. And if it's level 13 or higher, he can actually target an FA engrave and special summon it back to your field. So really cool recovery card in the deck. We then play the 1 Stellar Wind Wolf Riot, followed by the 1 Sword Soul Supreme Sovereign Chenging. You know, basically the replacement for Baron. However, I would definitely prefer to run Baron in this deck if I could. Then we also have the 1 copy of Psychic End Punisher for our level 11 Synchro of choice. And then we also play 1 copy of High Speedroid Clearwing Rider, just because it's a really fun card to play in this deck. And then we round out the last Synchro with 1 copy of Super Heavy Samurai Brave Mazurao, which is just our Synchro 12 of choice. So all of these really amazing cards in their own right. And like I said, I just mainly built this deck just to have fun with. I wasn't expecting much out of it, honestly. And in testing, it's been pretty competent. And like I said, it's just one of those like feel-good decks. You know, everyone has their own like, you know, pet decks that they like to play. FA is that for me. So hopefully you guys can enjoy, you know, the work that I put into trying to make this deck not be a complete pile of shit, for lack of a better word. But that rounds out the extra deck. Now we're going to be moving into the side deck, which again is totally up to personal preference. I really didn't put that much thought into the side. You know, simply because I haven't been to locals recently. I've been pretty busy with like family stuff and work and whatnot. So not too sure how the format's shaping out currently, but again, side deck is always up to personal preference. But for the purposes of this deck, I'm choosing to sideboard 3 copies of Effect Veiler just to give the deck more non-engine slots if needed against those combo heavy decks that you need hand traps to be able to stop them. We're also siding 1 Anti-Human Intelligence Messiah, a really interesting pendulum monster that I think can definitely floodgate certain matchups. I'm thinking matchups like Sky Striker, matchups like, oh man, what is the Runic? Sorry, the name was escaping me. Because while this card is in the pen scale, any spell trap sent to grave is banished instead, which is really crazy. So it's like a reverse dimensional fissure, which is pretty awesome. And then he also is a really cool extender of sorts, being able to take a pendulum scale, put it in your extra deck face up, and then special summon this card from the hand. So pretty cool card here. Then we're also playing from the brand new set, Legacy of Destruction. We're playing 3 copies of Turn Silence, which is actually, this card belongs to the Shining Sarcophagus, the Yugi deck. But this card is interesting. It's a quick play spell that allows you to target a face-up monster you control and increase its level by 3. That obviously screams perfect for, you know, FA who want their levels increased. But what's cool about this is that this level increase is permanent. I know that FA has a card that can do this called FA Downforce, but FA Downforce only increases their level for that turn, whereas Turn Silence increases their level by 3 permanently. So I felt that this card was a lot better, despite it not being searchable. But again, we're choosing to side it. It's been coming up here and there. And then we also side 3 copies of Speedroid Duplicate, just a really cool trap card for when you know you're going first. Being able to banish a wind monster from grave to target a card the opponent controls, bounce it to the hand is really strong. And then we round out the remaining 3 cards in the side with a playset of Gravity Collapse, a really crazy counter trap that states when your opponent would summon a monster, you send a face-up synchro you control to grave to negate the summon, and if you do, destroy that monster, and then your opponent cannot summon a monster until the end of this turn, which is really insane. So that's going to wrap up the sideboard for my FA deck for the May 2024 format. Let me know down in the comments below what you guys think of FA in general, and let me know also too if you guys have really cool pet decks that you like playing that maybe aren't the most competitively viable, but despite what people say, you still can't help yourself but play it. It's just one of your guilty pleasures. Definitely want to hear from you guys in the comments of what deck styles might be. But with that being said, guys, thank you all for the continued support. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And with that being said, this is Nick, hitting that end phase. Peace.